Well, it looks like the biggest question now has essentially been answered, which to a lot of people's mind was what was the connection between these two incidents. Obviously, during the press conference there, you heard the sheriff say that there were certain similarities, but officials are now saying essentially that they see no direct connection between these two attacks. There had been some reporting that the two suspects may have, they were both obviously U.S. military veterans, may have overlapped briefly at a base in the United States during their time when they served. But for the moment, that looks like it was a little bit of a false trail. And there was no connection, though that was, a lot of people's immediate instinct. The other thing that really struck me from that press conference was them saying they are looking globally, so trying to figure out putting each of these attacks in their context. Obviously, there was the New Orleans attack. The suspect had an Islamic State flag in his car, authorities said. No such indication on the Las Vegas one. But it looks like authorities are not ruling out the possibility that these may have not been lone actors, that they might have had some support network. So that's still a big unknown that we're looking into.
What surprised me, or was what really struck me, Nick, during this press conference, especially compared to the one we saw with the FBI and other law enforcement officials out of New Orleans earlier today, was that in New Orleans, officials were very quick to say, this was terrorism, it's being treated as terrorism. We didn't hear that from this press conference this afternoon. Right. How do you read into that?
Well, a very thorny and sensitive issue, how these attacks get labeled terrorism or not. I would suspect that the reason for the New Orleans attack being labeled that way was they found that Islamic State flag in there. There was a lot of conflicting information, of course, going around in the run-up to that, whether the suspect was a migrant, had come from abroad, when in fact we learned he was a U.S. citizen, had served in the Army for many years. But when you see that flag, that Islamic State flag in the car, that's a pretty telling indication. Of course, the big question there again is, was this suspect inspired by the Islamic State, essentially self-radicalized, as has happened with some attacks in the past, or was this some bigger operation or part of some bigger operation by the group, which we do have indications has sort of come back after the punishing campaign by the U.S. to essentially eliminate it, that there has been something of a resurgence. However, at this time, I mean, again, stressing there is still so much we don't know about either of these attacks. I think in the case of the New Orleans one, there is no immediate evidence that this was planned or orchestrated with the Islamic State, which still has a toehold in Syria, and all indications suggest that the suspect there had essentially been self-radicalized, but we're still trying to answer all those questions.
No, absolutely. And Nick, I feel like we do have a fair amount more answers as you are laying out and as we just heard in that press conference, but what's top of mind for you in terms of kind of the big question that still needs to be answered?
Well, I think, really there's the very interesting fact that both were military veterans. A lot of issues are coming to light about the background of the New Orleans attacker and the strain he had potentially been under at home. We know a lot less about the attacker in Las Vegas, though I did think it was also very interesting from the press conference there that they said, hey, they believe the effectiveness of the bomb was not sort of in keeping with the level of experience they thought that the suspect there had, which I think is obviously an indication, as officials have said, that he was a special operator in the U.S. military. So, but certainly the fact that both appear to be American citizens, both Army veterans, one we know served in Afghanistan. We're still trying to get details of the Las Vegas attacker's military record. But there are some similarities there that really beg some big questions, and we're going to be trying to figure that out over the next couple days.